People won't remember your words, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. That's the real power of communication. Most people speak to be heard, but the most magnetic people, they speak to be felt. They use tone, timing, trust. They don't impress with facts. They connect with presence. In this video, I'll break down the 5 core laws of magnetic communication. So you're not just talking, you're influencing. The kind of influence that opens doors, builds loyalty, and creates opportunity. Subscribe to our channel if you're ready to master your mind, and tell us, where are you watching from? Let me tell you something that might surprise you. The most powerful communicators in history weren't the ones with perfect grammar or flawless delivery. They weren't the ones who memorized every line or never stumbled over a word. They were the ones who dared to be human. Abraham Lincoln had a high-pitched voice that some called awkward. Winston Churchill had a lisp. Franklin Roosevelt spoke from a wheelchair in an era when disability was hidden. Yet these men moved nations. They changed the course of history. Not because they were perfect, but because they were real. You see, there's something magical that happens when you stop trying to impress and start trying to connect. When you drop the mask of perfection and show up as yourself, flaws and all, people lean in. They trust you. They follow you. Here's what most people don't understand about communication. It's not about having all the right answers. It's about asking the right questions. It's not about never making mistakes. It's about making mistakes and owning them with grace. I once knew a salesman who stuttered. By every measure, he should have failed in his profession, but he became the top performer in his company. Why? Because his stutter made him authentic. It made people slow down and really listen. It made him work harder to connect on a human level. His imperfection became his greatest strength. That's the first law of magnetic communication. Connection beats perfection every single time. When you speak from a place of genuine care rather than calculated performance, something shifts in the room. People feel it. They sense that you're not trying to manipulate them or sell them something. You're trying to reach them. Think about the last time someone really connected with you through their words. Was it because they spoke perfectly, or was it because they spoke truthfully? Was it because they impressed you with their vocabulary, or was it because they touched something real inside you? But let me ask you this. When you communicate, are you trying to sound smart or be helpful? Are you trying to win an argument or win a heart? Are you speaking to prove a point or make a point? The difference is everything. Perfect communication is sterile. It's safe. It's forgettable. Real communication is messy. It's vulnerable. It's unforgettable. When you give yourself permission to be imperfect, you give others permission to be human. When you show your struggles, others feel safe to share theirs. When you admit you don't know everything, people trust you with what they do know. This is why the most magnetic communicators often pause mid-sentence, not because they forgot what to say, but because they're genuinely thinking about the best way to serve the person in front of them. They stumble over words because they're choosing them carefully. They show emotion because the moment calls for it. Your imperfections aren't bugs in your communication. They're features. They're what make you memorable. They're what make you trustworthy. They're what make you human. So here's your challenge. The next time you communicate, whether it's a presentation, a conversation, or even a text message, focus on connecting, not impressing. Be real, not perfect. Share your truth, not your script, because at the end of the day, people don't follow perfect leaders. They follow authentic ones. And authenticity isn't about having it all figured out. It's about being brave enough to figure it out together. Connection beats perfection. Every single time. In a world full of distractions, your attention is the rarest gift you can give. When you make someone feel like they're the only person in the room, you're not just communicating, you're creating magic. Here's the truth about human nature that most people miss. Everyone you meet is wearing an invisible sign around their neck. And that sign says one thing: make me feel important. You see it everywhere. The way people light up when you remember their name, the way they lean in when you ask about their weekend, the way they open up when you put down your phone and actually listen. But here's what I've learned in my years of studying human behavior. Most people are so busy trying to be interesting that they forget to be interested. They're so focused on what they're going to say next that they miss what's being said right now. The most magnetic communicators do the opposite. They make you feel like you're the most fascinating person they've ever met. Not because they're fake or manipulative, but because they're genuinely curious about you. I remember a woman who ran a small bakery in my neighborhood. She wasn't famous, she wasn't wealthy, but she had something more valuable than money or status. She had the ability to make every customer feel special. When you walked into her shop, she'd stop what she was doing, look you in the eye, and ask about your day, not as a formality, but because she actually cared about the answer. That bakery became the heart of the community, not because the bread was extraordinary, though it was good, but because she made people feel extraordinary. This is the second law of magnetic communication. Attention is the currency of connection, and when you spend it generously on others, they'll remember you forever. But let me ask you this. When was the last time you gave someone your complete, undivided attention? No phone buzzing in your pocket, no mental to-do list running in the background, no glancing at your watch or looking over their shoulder, just pure, focused presence. It's harder than it sounds, isn't it? We've trained ourselves to multitask, to split our attention, to always be partially somewhere else. But here's what we've lost in the process: the ability to make people feel truly seen. When you give someone your full attention, you're telling them something profound without saying a word. You're saying, in this moment, you matter more than my phone, my schedule, my problems, or my plans. You matter more than anything else in my world right now. That's not just communication, that's transformation. The most successful people I know aren't necessarily the smartest or the most talented. They're the ones who make others feel smart and talented. They're the ones who shine the spotlight on you instead of hogging it for themselves. They remember what you told them last week. They follow up on the things you mentioned caring about. They celebrate your wins and check on you during your struggles. They make you feel like your thoughts, your feelings, your very existence matters to them. Here's what most people don't understand about attention. It's not about the quantity of time you spend with someone. It's about the quality of presence you bring to that time. You can spend 2 hours with someone while completely distracted and leave them feeling ignored. Or you can spend 2 minutes with someone while completely present and leave them feeling valued beyond measure. The choice is yours in every interaction. When you're talking to your spouse, are you there or are you mentally at work? When you're listening to your children, are you hearing them or are you planning dinner? When you're meeting with a colleague, are you engaged or are you already thinking about your next appointment? Your body might be present, but where is your mind? Where is your heart? Where is your attention? People know the difference. They can feel when you're truly with them and when you're just going through the motions. They can sense when you're genuinely interested in their words and when you're just waiting for your turn to talk. The most magnetic communicators understand this. They don't just hear words. They feel emotions. They don't just process information. They connect with souls. They don't just participate in conversations. They create moments of genuine human connection. So here's your challenge. Choose one person today. Give them the gift of your complete attention. Put away your devices. Clear your mind. Open your heart. Listen not just to their words, but to their feelings. See not just their exterior, but their humanity. Make them feel like the only person in the room, because in that moment they should be. The fastest way to lose someone's attention is to talk about what matters to you without caring about what matters to them. The most magnetic communicators start where the other person already is, not where they want them to be. Here's a truth that will change how you communicate forever. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And the quickest way to show you care is to care about what they care about. I once watched a brilliant scientist give a presentation about climate change to a room full of farmers. He had charts, graphs, and compelling data. He spoke passionately about carbon emissions and global temperature trends. His science was flawless. His passion was genuine. But he lost the room in the first 5 minutes. Why? Because he started with what mattered to him, the science. But what mattered to them was their crops, their livelihood, their ability to feed their families. He was speaking a language they didn't connect with about problems that felt abstract to their daily reality. Then I watched another speaker address the same group. She started differently. She asked about their growing seasons. She inquired about changes they'd noticed in rainfall patterns. She listened to their stories about unpredictable weather affecting their harvests. Only then did she connect their real experiences to the larger scientific picture. Same message, different approach, completely different result. This is the third law of magnetic communication. You must build a bridge from their world to your world, and every bridge starts on their side of the river. Think about the last time someone tried to convince you of something. Did they start with why it mattered to them? Or did they start with why it should matter to you? Did they speak in language that made sense to them, or language that made sense? To you, most people make the same mistake. They fall in love with their own ideas and assume everyone else will too. They get so excited about their message that they forget to make it relevant to their audience. But here's what the most influential communicators understand. Your message isn't about you, it's about them. Your job isn't to impress them with your knowledge, it's to connect your knowledge to their needs. When you speak to someone's interests, you're not being manipulative. You're being respectful. You're acknowledging that their time is valuable and their concerns are valid. You're showing that you've done the work to understand them before asking them to understand you. I remember a manager who needed to implement a new software system at his company. His team was resistant to change. His first instinct was to talk about efficiency metrics and cost savings, things that mattered to him and his bosses. But nobody was buying in, so he changed his approach. He started asking questions. What frustrated them most about the current system? What would make their daily work easier? What would help them get home to their families sooner? When he finally presented the new software, he didn't lead with cost savings. He led with how it would eliminate the double data entry that was driving them crazy. He showed how it would reduce the errors that made them look bad to customers. He demonstrated how it would save them the overtime hours that were eating into their personal time. Same software, same benefits, but now he was speaking their language about their priorities. The resistance melted away. But let me ask you this: how often do you take the time to truly understand what matters to the people you're trying to reach? Do you know their fears, their hopes, their daily struggles? Do you understand their language, their values, their priorities? Or do you just assume they should care about what you care about? The most magnetic communicators are like skilled translators. They can take any message and translate it into language that resonates with their audience. They can find the connection between what they want to say and what their audience needs to hear. They don't water down their message. They don't compromise their values. They simply find the bridge between their truth and the other person's reality. This takes work. It requires curiosity. It demands that you spend time learning about people before you try to teach them something. It means asking questions before making statements. It means listening before leading. But here's the payoff. When you speak to people's interests, they don't just hear you, they lean in. They don't just listen, they engage. They don't just understand, they care. Because you've done something rare in our self-centered world. You've made your message about them, not about you. So here's your challenge. Before your next important conversation, presentation, or even casual interaction, pause and ask yourself, what matters to them? What keeps them up at night? What would make their life better, easier, or more fulfilling? Start there. Build from there. Connect from there. Because the most powerful communication isn't about broadcasting your message louder. It's about tuning your message to the frequency where they're already listening. People have radar for fake. They might not be able to explain it, but they can feel it. The moment you start performing, instead of connecting, you lose them. Authenticity isn't just a buzzword, it's your secret weapon. Here's something I learned early in my career that changed everything. The most persuasive word in any language isn't please or guaranteed or even free. It's because, but only when what follows is honest. I once knew a salesman who had every technique down pat, perfect pitch, flawless timing, all the right. Objection handling responses. He could recite his presentation in his sleep, and his results were mediocre at best. Then I met another salesman who broke every rule in the book. He stumbled over words. He sometimes forgot key points. He even admitted when he didn't know something. But his results were extraordinary. Why? Because everything he said came from the heart. When the first salesman spoke, people heard a presentation. When the second one spoke, people heard a person. This is the fourth law of magnetic communication. Sincerity isn't just preferred, it's required. In a world full of scripts and surfaces, authenticity cuts through like nothing else. But here's what most people get wrong about being authentic. They think it means sharing everything, oversharing personal information, or being unprofessional. That's not authenticity. That's poor judgment. Real authenticity means aligning your words with your values. It means speaking from your genuine beliefs, not from what you think people want to hear. It means being honest about your motivations. Even when they're not perfect, the most magnetic communicators aren't afraid to say, "I don't know," when they don't know. They're not afraid to admit mistakes when they make them. They're not afraid to show enthusiasm when they're excited or concern. When they're worried, they're not trying to be perfect. They're trying to be real. I remember a CEO who had to announce layoffs to his company. He could have delivered a sterile corporate message full of business jargon and strategic necessity. Instead, he stood in front of his employees and said, "This is the hardest thing I've ever had to do as a leader. These are good people losing their jobs, and I want you to know that this decision keeps me up at night." Was it polished? No. Was it vulnerable? Yes, and that vulnerability created connection even in the midst of crisis. But let me ask you this. When you communicate, are you trying to sound like yourself or like someone else? Are you using your own words or words you think you should use? Are you sharing your genuine thoughts or thoughts you think are expected? Here's what I've discovered. People don't connect with your perfection. They connect with your truth. They don't follow your credentials. They follow your character. They don't buy your product or service. They buy your sincerity about why it matters. The most successful people I know aren't necessarily the most polished speakers, but they're the most honest ones. When they believe in something, you can feel it. When they're concerned about something, you sense it. When they're excited about something, it's contagious. That's the power of speaking without a script. Your natural passion comes through. Your genuine care shows up. Your real personality emerges. Scripts are safe. They're predictable. They're controllable. But they're also limiting. When you're tied to a script, you can't respond to the moment. You can't adapt to the person. You can't connect with what's really happening in the room. Sincerity is risky. It's unpredictable. It's vulnerable. But it's also powerful. When you speak from your heart, people listen with theirs. This doesn't mean you shouldn't prepare. Good communicators do their homework. They know their material. They understand their audience. But they hold their preparation lightly, ready to set it aside when the moment calls for something more genuine. The preparation gives you confidence. The sincerity gives you connection. And connection is where influence happens. I once watched a speaker completely abandon his prepared remarks in the middle of a presentation. Someone in the audience had shared something personal, and he felt called to respond to it directly. He spoke from his heart about his own similar experience. The energy in the room shifted. People leaned in, hearts opened. That moment of authentic connection did more than his entire prepared presentation could have done. Here's what most people don't understand. Your imperfect truth is more powerful than anyone else's perfect lies. Your genuine concern is more compelling than manufactured urgency. Your real enthusiasm is more contagious than forced excitement. So here's your challenge. The next time you have something important to communicate, prepare your content, but not your performance. Know your material, but be ready to abandon it for something more honest. Trust your genuine feelings more than your practiced phrases. Because in a world full of scripts, the person who dares to speak from the heart will always stand out. Not because they're louder, but because they're real. And real is rare. Real is magnetic. Real is what people have been waiting to hear. Everyone walks around with an invisible hunger. They're starving for recognition, appreciation, and acknowledgement. The person who learns to feed this hunger with genuine compliments holds a key that opens every door. But here's the thing about compliments that most people get wrong. They throw them around like confetti, meaningless, generic, and forgotten. As soon as they hit the ground, real compliments aren't decoration. They're precision instruments that can change someone's entire day, week, or even life. I once watched a teacher transform a struggling student with a single, well-placed compliment. This kid had been failing, acting out, convinced he was worthless. Then this teacher noticed something nobody else had seen. After class, she said, "David, the way you explained that concept to Maria showed real insight. You have a gift for making complex things simple." That was it. One moment, one observation, one genuine acknowledgement of something real. That boy went from the back of the class to the front. Not because of magic, but because someone saw his value and had the wisdom to name it. This is the fifth law of magnetic communication. Specific, sincere appreciation is the most underused tool in human interaction. When you learn to see people's strengths and reflect them back, you become magnetic. But let me be clear about something. I'm not talking about empty flattery. I'm not talking about false praise or manipulation. I'm talking about the skill of seeing what's genuinely good in people and having the courage to tell them. Most people are walking around carrying incredible gifts that nobody notices. They have insights that go unacknowledged. They show kindness that gets taken for granted. They demonstrate skills that remain invisible. The most magnetic communicators are like talent scouts for the human spirit. They see the good that others miss. They notice the effort that goes unrecognized. They catch people doing things right instead of just pointing out what's wrong. Think about the last genuine compliment you received. Not nice job or good work, but something specific, something that showed the person really saw you. How? Did it make you feel? How long did you remember it? How did it change your energy? Now think about the last genuine compliment you gave someone else. When was it? What did you say? How did they respond? If you're like most people, you remember receiving compliments much more easily than giving them. That's because we're all hungry for appreciation, but we forget that everyone else is hungry too. Here's what I've learned about the power of genuine appreciation. It doesn't just make people feel good, it makes them better. When you acknowledge someone's strength, you reinforce it. When you notice their improvement, you encourage more of it. When you see their potential, you help them see it too. But there's an art to this. Random compliments feel fake. Generic praise feels hollow. The compliments that matter are the ones that show you've been paying attention. Instead of "you're smart," try "the way you broke down that problem into manageable pieces was brilliant." Instead of "you're kind," try "I noticed how you made sure." Everyone felt included in the conversation today. See the difference? The second versions prove you were watching. They show you care enough to notice details. They make the person feel truly seen. I remember a manager who transformed his entire team's performance simply by changing how he gave feedback. Instead of only pointing out problems, he started a practice of beginning every interaction by acknowledging something specific that person had done well. Before we talk about the project deadline, I want to tell you that the way you handled that difficult customer yesterday was masterful. Your patience and creativity turned a complaint into loyalty. Same conversations, same challenges, But now people left his office energized instead of deflated. They worked harder because they felt valued. They took more risks because they felt supported. But let me ask you this. When you interact with people, are you looking for what's wrong or what's right? Are you noticing their mistakes or their efforts? Are you seeing their flaws or their potential? Your focus shapes their reality. When you look for problems, you find them and amplify them. When you look for strengths, you find them and multiply them. The most magnetic people make others feel like the best version of themselves. They hold up a mirror that reflects back not your current limitations, but your future possibilities. This doesn't mean ignoring areas for improvement. It means starting with what's working. It means catching people succeeding, not just failing. It means investing in their strengths before trying to fix their weaknesses. Here's what most people don't understand about appreciation. It's not about making people feel good, though it does that. It's about making people feel capable. When you acknowledge someone's abilities, you remind them they have abilities. When you notice their progress, you encourage more progress. So, here's your challenge. For the next week, become a talent scout. Look for one specific thing to appreciate in every person you interact with. Not generic praise, but detailed acknowledgement of something real you observed. Watch what happens. Watch how people light up. Watch how they lean in. Watch how they remember you long after the conversation ends. Because in a world that's quick to criticize and slow to appreciate, the person who sees the good and speaks it becomes unforgettable. The most powerful tool in communication isn't your mouth, it's your curiosity. Great communicators don't just talk well, they ask well. The right question can unlock a heart, solve a problem, or change a life. Most people ask questions to get information, but magnetic communicators ask questions to create connection. They understand that questions aren't just tools for gathering data. They're invitations for someone to share their world with you. I once sat in on a job interview where the candidate asked the interviewer, "What's the most challenging part of your role here, and how do you navigate through those difficulties?" Instead of just answering the standard questions, this person showed genuine interest in the interviewer's experience. That simple shift changed everything. The interview became a conversation. The power dynamic leveled out. By the end of the meeting, they weren't just considering hiring him. They were excited about working with him. This is the sixth law of magnetic communication. Questions are bridges to understanding, and the right question can take you anywhere you want to go in a relationship. But here's what most people get wrong about asking questions. They ask surface-level questions and expect deep connections. They ask yes or no questions and wonder why conversations feel flat. They ask about facts when they should be asking about feelings. How was your weekend is a question. What was the highlight of your weekend is an invitation. Are you busy is checking availability. What's energizing you most about your work right now is showing interest in their inner world. The difference isn't just in the words, it's in the intention behind them. Think about the last time someone asked you a question that made you pause and really think, not "how are you," but something that required you to look inward and share something real. How did that feel? How did it change your perception of that person? Great questions do more than gather information. They show respect for the other person's thoughts and experiences. They demonstrate that you value their perspective. They signal that you're not just making small talk, you're genuinely interested in who they are. I remember a salesperson who revolutionized her approach by changing one simple question. Instead of asking, "What's your budget for this project?" she started asking, "What would success look like for you in this situation?" That shift opened up entirely different conversations about dreams, fears, and real needs. Instead of a transaction, she was having a consultation. Instead of selling a product, she was solving problems. Instead of being another vendor, she became a trusted advisor. But let me ask you this. When you're talking with people, are you asking questions to understand them or to advance your agenda? Are you curious about their answers, or are you just Waiting for them to stop talking so you can make your point? The most magnetic communicators ask questions they don't know the answers to. They're genuinely curious about other people's experiences, opinions, and perspectives. They ask follow-up questions that go deeper. They remember what people tell them and build on it in future conversations. Here's what I've discovered about the power of good questions. They don't just reveal information. They reveal character, both yours and theirs. When you ask thoughtful questions, you show that you're thoughtful. When you ask caring questions, you show that you care. But the magic happens in how people respond to being truly heard. When someone asks you a question that shows they've been listening, really listening, to who you are and what matters to you, something shifts. You feel seen, you feel valued, you feel understood. That's what magnetic communicators create with their questions. They create moments where people feel genuinely heard and understood. The best questions aren't just about getting information, they're about giving permission. Permission to think out loud, permission to share something personal, permission to be vulnerable, permission to dream. What's been on your mind lately? Gives permission to share concerns. What are you most excited about right now? Gives permission to share hopes. What's something you've learned recently that surprised you? Gives permission to share growth. These aren't interrogations, they're invitations. Invitations into deeper, more meaningful connection. I once watched a manager turn around a struggling team member simply by changing the questions he asked. Instead of, "Why didn't you meet your deadline?" he asked, "What obstacles did you encounter, and how can I help you overcome them next time?" Same situation, different question. Completely different outcome. One question created defensiveness, the other created collaboration. Here's what most people don't understand about questions. They're not just about getting answers. They're about starting conversations that matter. They're about moving beyond the surface to the substance. They're about connecting with what's real in another person's life. So here's your challenge. In your next conversation, ask one question that you're genuinely curious about. Not a question to advance your agenda, but a question to understand their world. Ask about their thoughts, their feelings, their experiences, their dreams. Then do something even more powerful. Listen to their answer. Really listen. Ask a follow-up question based on what they shared. Show them that their answer mattered to you. Because when you ask questions that help people open up, they don't just share their answers with you, they share themselves with you. And that's where real connection begins. Most people think communication is about talking. But the most magnetic communicators know the truth. It's about listening. Not just hearing words, but truly understanding what's behind them. In a world where everyone's fighting to be heard, the person who actually listens becomes irresistible. Here's something that will change how you see every conversation. People don't just want to be heard, they need to be heard. It's a fundamental human hunger, as basic as the need for food or shelter. When you really listen to someone, you're not just being polite, you're feeding their soul. I once watched a counselor work with a teenager who everyone said was impossible to reach. This kid was angry, defiant, shut down. Therapist after therapist had tried to break through. Then this counselor did something different. She didn't try to fix him or advise him or even talk to him much at all. She just listened, really listened. For weeks, she let him talk about whatever he wanted to talk about. She reflected back what she heard. She asked questions that showed she was paying attention. She never judged, never interrupted, never tried to change the subject. Slowly, something shifted. The anger started to crack. The defiance began to soften. Not because she had brilliant insights or perfect techniques, but because she gave him something rarer than gold, the experience of being truly heard. This is the seventh law of magnetic communication. Listening isn't passive. It's the most active thing you can do in a conversation. When you listen with your whole being, you give people a gift they can't get anywhere else. But here's what most people call listening that isn't listening at all. They're waiting for their turn to talk. They're formulating their response while the other person is still speaking. They're judging, analyzing, or preparing their rebuttal. Real listening means temporarily setting aside your own agenda and stepping into someone else's world. It means caring more about understanding them than about being understood by them. It means being genuinely curious about their experience, even when it's different from yours. The most magnetic listeners don't just hear your words, they feel your emotions. They don't just process your information, they understand your intention. They listen not just to what you're saying, but to what you're not saying. Think about the last time someone really listened to you. Not just heard your words, but truly understood your feelings. How did that change you? How did it change your relationship with that person? How did it change what you were willing to share? Great listeners create safety. When people feel heard, they feel safe. When they feel safe, they open up. When they open up, real connection becomes possible. I remember a CEO who transformed her company culture simply by becoming a better listener. She started scheduling regular one-on-one conversations with her employees, not to give direction or solve problems, but just to understand their experiences. She listened to their frustrations without immediately trying to fix them. She heard their ideas without instantly evaluating them. She understood their concerns without rushing to dismiss them. The result? Engagement scores soared, innovation increased, turnover plummeted, not because she changed policies or processes, but because people felt heard and valued. But let me ask you this. When someone is talking to you, where is your attention? Are you fully present with them, or are you partially somewhere else? Are you listening to understand or listening to respond? Are you hearing their heart or just their words? Here's what I've learned about the difference between good listeners and great listeners. Good listeners hear what you say. Great listeners hear what you mean. Good listeners respond to your words. Great listeners respond to your feelings. When someone says, "Work has been really busy lately," a good listener might respond, "That sounds stressful." But a great listener hears the exhaustion behind the words and might say, "It sounds like you've been carrying a heavy load. How are you holding up?" The difference is empathy. The difference is depth. The difference is connection. Great listeners also know the power of silence. They're not afraid of pauses. They understand that sometimes the most important things are said in the quiet moments after someone thinks they're done talking. They create space for reflection. They allow for processing. They give people permission to think deeper and share more. But here's what stops most people from becoming great listeners. They think they need to have answers. They think they need to solve problems. They think they need to say something profound or helpful. The truth is, most of the time, people don't need you to fix their problems. They need you to understand their problems. They don't need your solutions. They need your attention. They don't need your advice. They need your empathy. There's a reason why people pay therapists hundreds of dollars an hour just to listen to them. It's not because therapists have all the answers. It's because they know how to listen in a way that helps people hear themselves. When you listen with genuine curiosity and care, something magical happens. People start to solve their own problems. They start to see their own answers. They start to understand themselves better, simply because they feel understood by you. I once knew a manager who was known as the best problem solver in his company. But here's his secret. He rarely solved anyone's problems. He just listened to them so well that they solved their own problems while talking to him. He would ask clarifying questions. He would reflect back what he heard. He would help people explore their thoughts and feelings, but he rarely gave direct advice. Instead, he created the space for people to think clearly and find their own solutions. That's the power of deep listening. It doesn't just help you understand others, it helps them understand themselves. So here's your challenge. In your next important conversation, focus entirely on listening. Don't worry about what you're going to say next. Don't plan your response. Don't try to solve their problems or share your experiences. Just listen. Listen with your ears, your heart, and your whole attention. Listen for the feelings behind the facts. Listen for the fears behind the words. Listen for the dreams hidden in their stories. Watch what happens when someone feels truly heard by you. Watch how they open up. Watch how they trust you. Watch how they remember that conversation long after it's over. Because in a world full of noise, the person who listens becomes a sanctuary. In a world full of talkers, the person who listens becomes treasured. In a world full of judgment, the person who listens with empathy becomes magnetic. Listen like it's a superpower, because it is. Your words tell people what you think. Your tone tells them who you are, and people decide whether to trust you long before they finish processing what you've said. The most magnetic communicators understand that how you say something matters more than what you say. Here's a truth that will revolutionize your communication. People don't just hear your words, they feel your intentions. Your tone carries your true message. It reveals your respect, your care, your sincerity, or lack thereof. You can say, "I'm here to help," with a tone that makes people believe you, or with a tone that makes them doubt you. I once witnessed two customer service representatives handle identical complaints. The first one said all the right words. "I understand your frustration. Let me see what I can do to help." But his tone was flat, disinterested, almost robotic. The customer became more agitated. The second representative said almost the same words, but her tone was warm, concerned, genuinely caring. She spoke as if she truly felt bad about the customer's experience and really wanted to make it right. The customer immediately calmed down and became collaborative. Same words, same situation, completely different outcomes. The difference was tone. This is the 8th law of magnetic communication. Your tone is your truth detector. It reveals what you really feel about the person you're talking to and what you really think about what you're saying. Think about your own experiences. You've probably had someone apologize to you with words, while their tone told you they weren't really sorry. You've had someone say they were happy to help, while their tone suggested they'd rather be anywhere else. You've had someone give you a compliment that felt like an insult because of how they said it. Your unconscious mind picks up these tonal inconsistencies immediately. It's like having a built-in lie detector that's constantly running. When someone's words and tone don't match, we trust the tone every time. But here's what most people don't realize about tone. It's not just about sounding pleasant or professional. It's about aligning your inner state with your outer expression. The most magnetic communicators don't just manage their tone, they manage their mindset. When you genuinely care about helping someone, care shows up in your tone automatically. When you're truly interested in what someone has to say, interest comes through in how you respond. When you authentically respect someone, respect colors every word you speak to them. I remember a teacher who could say, "Please sit down," to a disruptive student and somehow make it sound like an invitation rather than a command. Her tone carried respect for the student as a person, even while addressing inappropriate behavior. Students responded to her differently than to teachers who said the same words with irritation or authority. The secret wasn't in her vocal technique, it was in her heart. She genuinely cared about her students and saw their potential, even when they were acting out. That care was audible in every interaction. But let me ask you this. What does your tone say about your true feelings toward the people you're communicating with? When you're frustrated, does it leak into your voice even when your words remain professional? When you're excited, can people hear your enthusiasm? When you care, is it audible? Your tone reveals your emotional state, your level of engagement, and your genuine feelings about the conversation. People can hear whether you're present or distracted, interested or bored, respectful or dismissive. The most successful leaders I know have mastered the art of tonal intelligence. They can convey strength without harshness, authority without arrogance, concern without panic. They understand that their tone sets the emotional temperature of every interaction. Here's what's fascinating about tone. It's contagious. When you speak with warmth, people respond with warmth. When you speak with respect, people feel respected and act more respectfully. When you speak with calm confidence, people feel reassured. But the opposite is also true. Speak with irritation, and people become defensive. Speak with dismissiveness, and people shut down. Speak with anxiety, and people become anxious too. Your tone doesn't just communicate your message, it shapes the entire dynamic of the interaction. I once watched a negotiation completely transform when one party changed their tone. They were at an impasse, positions hardened, tempers rising. Then one negotiator paused, took a breath, and changed his approach. Same concern, same constraints, but now his tone conveyed partnership instead of adversarial positioning. The energy in the room shifted immediately. Defensiveness melted. Creativity emerged. A solution that had seemed impossible became obvious. Here's what most people don't understand about tone. It's not just about vocal inflection or speaking volume, it's about the emotional energy you bring to your words. It's about whether your tone builds bridges or walls, whether it opens hearts or closes them. The most magnetic communicators use tone as a tool of connection. They speak to people's hearts before they speak to their minds. They create emotional safety with their voice before they share their message with their words. So here's your challenge. Pay attention to your tone in every interaction today. Notice how people respond differently when you speak with genuine warmth versus polite distance. See how conversations flow differently when your tone conveys interest versus obligation. Practice aligning your inner state with your desired outcome. If you want people to trust you, speak from a place of trustworthiness. If you want people to feel valued, speak from a place of appreciation. If you want people to open up, speak from a place of genuine curiosity, because your words might explain your thoughts, but your tone reveals your soul. And people connect with souls, not scripts. People trust people who feel familiar. The most magnetic communicators understand this instinctively. They know how to match someone's energy and rhythm, creating instant rapport. But here's the advanced technique. Once you've mirrored their energy, you can gently lead them to where you want the conversation to go. This isn't manipulation, it's emotional intelligence. It's recognizing that communication is like dancing. Someone has to lead, but first you have to find the rhythm together. I once watched a hostage negotiator work with a man threatening to jump from a bridge. The man was agitated, speaking rapidly, his emotions all over the place. The negotiator could have tried to calm him down immediately, speaking in slow, soothing tones. Instead, he matched the man's energy level and pace. He spoke with urgency too, but channeled it toward hope instead of despair. He matched the intensity but shifted the direction. Gradually, he began to slow his speech, lower his voice, and the man began to mirror him back. Within an hour, both men were speaking calmly, and a life was saved. This is the 9th law of magnetic communication. Meet people where they are, then lead them where they need to go. You can't skip the first part. To get to the second, think about your own experiences. When you're excited about something and someone responds with flat energy, how does that feel? When you're concerned about something and someone dismisses it with casual indifference, do you feel heard? When you're speaking quickly because you're passionate and someone responds at half your pace, does it create connection or disconnection? The most magnetic communicators are like emotional chameleons. They can sense the energy in the room and adapt accordingly. When someone is enthusiastic, they match that enthusiasm. When someone is concerned, they acknowledge that concern. When someone is hesitant, they respect that hesitation. But here's the key. They don't just mirror energy indefinitely. They use mirroring as a bridge to influence. Once they've established rapport by matching someone's state, they gradually shift toward the energy that serves the conversation best. I remember a sales manager who was meeting with a potential client who was clearly stressed and rushed. Instead of launching into his prepared presentation, he acknowledged the client's time pressure and spoke with corresponding urgency about how quickly they could solve his problem. Once the client felt understood and the urgency validated, the manager gradually shifted to a calmer pace, helping the client slow down enough to actually hear the solution. By the end of the meeting, both men were relaxed and collaborative. Same outcome, but achieved by first meeting the client where he was, instead of demanding he meet the manager where he wanted to be. But let me ask you this. When you communicate, do you adapt to the other person's style, or do you expect them to adapt to yours? Do you match their pace and energy, or do you stick rigidly to your own communication preferences? Here's what I've discovered about the power of mirroring and leading. It works because it honors people's current emotional state while gently guiding them toward a better one. It shows respect for where they are while creating movement toward where they could be. This technique is incredibly powerful in difficult conversations. When someone is angry, don't immediately try to calm them down. First, acknowledge their anger with appropriate intensity. I can see this really upset you, and I understand why. Match their concern, then gradually model the energy you want. The conversation to have when someone is sad, don't immediately try to cheer them up. First, sit with them in their sadness. This is really hard for you. Match their emotional state. Then slowly introduce hope or possibility. When someone is excited, don't immediately dampen their enthusiasm with practical concerns. First, celebrate with them. This is fantastic news. Match their joy. Then gradually introduce any necessary considerations. The magic happens in the transition. When you've truly met someone where they are, they'll naturally follow you where you're going. But if you try to lead before you've mirrored, you'll encounter resistance. I once watched a therapist work with a couple in crisis. The husband was furious, the wife was hurt and withdrawn. Instead of immediately trying to create calm dialogue, the therapist first acknowledged the intensity of both their feelings. To the husband, "You're really angry about this, and that anger is telling us something important." To the wife, "And you're feeling really hurt, and maybe like shutting down is the safest thing to do right now." By validating both their emotional states, she created safety for both of them. Only then did she begin to slowly shift the energy toward productive dialogue. The breakthrough came not because she ignored their emotions, but because she honored them first. Here's what most people don't understand about mirroring and leading. It's not about being fake or manipulative. It's about being emotionally flexible enough to meet people where they are. It's about having enough emotional intelligence to recognize that your communication style isn't the only valid one. The most magnetic communicators can be high energy with high energy people and thoughtful with reflective people. They can be direct with people who appreciate directness and gentle with people who need gentleness. They adapt their approach while staying true to their values. So here's your challenge. In your next important conversation, spend the first few minutes matching the other person's energy and communication style. If they're speaking quickly, speak with appropriate pace. If they're being thoughtful and slow, respect that rhythm. If they're excited, join their enthusiasm. If they're concerned, acknowledge their concern. Then, once you've established that rapport, gently begin to model the energy and direction you want the conversation to take. Watch how much more willing people are to follow your lead when they first feel like you understand where they're coming from, because the most powerful influence doesn't force people to change. It meets them where they are and shows them a better place to go. Facts tell, stories sell. But more than that, stories heal, inspire, and transform. The most magnetic communicators know that humans aren't moved by logic alone. We're moved by narrative. We remember stories long after we forget statistics. We feel stories in our hearts even when facts only reach our minds. Here's why stories have such power over us. Our brains are literally wired for narrative. For thousands of years, stories were how we passed down wisdom, shared experiences, and made sense of the world. When you tell a story, you're not just sharing information, you're speaking the language of the human soul. I once watched a CEO try to motivate his struggling sales team with a presentation full of charts, graphs, and performance metrics. The team listened politely, but their energy remained flat. Numbers, it seemed, weren't enough to reignite their passion. Then he put away his slides and told them a story. He talked about a customer who had called him personally to thank the company for how their product had changed her life. He described her voice, her emotion, the specific ways their work had made a difference. He painted a picture of why their jobs mattered beyond just hitting targets. The energy in the room completely shifted. Faces lit up. People leaned in. That story did what all the data couldn't. It reminded them why they cared about their work in the first place. This is the 10th law of magnetic communication. Stories don't just convey information, they transfer emotion. They don't just inform minds, they touch hearts. And people make decisions with their hearts first, then justify them with their minds. Think about the most influential communicators. The teachers who changed your life, the leaders who inspired you, the friends who helped you through difficult times. Chances are, they were all storytellers. They knew how to wrap their wisdom in narrative, their lessons in experience, their advice in illustration. But here's what most people get wrong about storytelling in communication. They think it has to be dramatic or entertaining. They think they need to be great orators or have lived extraordinary lives. The truth is, the most powerful stories are often the simplest ones. Moments of human truth that everyone can relate to. The story doesn't have to be about you, though personal stories often have the most impact. It can be about someone you know, something you witnessed, an experience that taught you something important. What matters isn't the size of the story, it's the size of the truth it contains. I remember a manager who was struggling to get his team to embrace a new safety protocol. He could have lectured them about regulations and liability. Instead, he told them about his brother-in-law, who had been injured at work because he skipped a safety step to save time. He described the months of recovery, the impact on his family, the regret everyone felt. Suddenly, the safety protocol wasn't just a corporate requirement. It was about protecting real people with real families who mattered to someone. Compliance went from 60% to 95% overnight. But let me ask you this. When you want to make a point or teach a lesson, do you lead with facts or with stories? Do you share data or experiences? Do you tell people what to think, or do you help them feel what you felt? Here's what I've learned about the power of story and communication. Stories create empathy. When you tell someone about an experience, they don't just understand it intellectually, they experience it emotionally. They put themselves in the shoes of the characters. They feel what the people in your story felt. This is why stories are so persuasive. They don't argue with people's logic. They connect with their emotions. They don't force conclusions. They let people reach their own insights. They don't lecture. They illustrate. The most magnetic communicators are master storytellers, even if they don't think of themselves that way. They understand that every point they want to make can be strengthened with a story. Every lesson they want to teach can be wrapped in narrative. Every truth they want to share can be illustrated with experience. They know that when someone says, "That reminds me of a time when," everyone leans in. Because stories promise what facts can't deliver, meaning emotion and connection. But stories do more than just make communication more engaging. They make it more memorable. Our brains remember stories in ways they simply can't remember abstract information. We might forget the statistics, but we remember the person those statistics represent. We might forget the principle, but we remember the example that illustrated it. I once heard a financial advisor explain compound interest to a young couple by telling them about his grandmother who saved $1 a day for 50 years and left her family a legacy of $200,000. That story made the concept real in a way that no mathematical formula could. Here's what most people don't understand about using stories in communication. You don't need permission to tell them. You don't need to announce, "Let me tell you a story." You just begin. I was talking to a customer yesterday who, my daughter came home from school and told me, "I'll never forget the time when." Stories create bridges between your experience and their understanding. They make abstract concepts concrete. They make distant possibilities feel immediate. They make your message not just heard, but felt. So, here's your challenge. The next time you want to make an important point, find a story that illustrates it. It doesn't have to be long or elaborate. It just has to be true and relevant. Share the experience, the emotion, the lesson learned. Watch how differently people respond when you wrap your message in narrative. Watch how much longer they remember it. Watch how much deeper it penetrates their hearts, because in a world full of information, the person who can transform facts into stories becomes unforgettable. Facts inform, but stories transform. The moment someone feels like a target instead of a person, they put up walls. The most magnetic communicators understand this instinctively. They know the difference between connecting with someone and trying to get something from them. And that difference changes everything. Here's a truth that will revolutionize how you approach every interaction. People have radar for agenda. They can sense when you're more interested in what they can do for you than in who they are as a human being. They can feel when you're performing rather than connecting, when you're selling rather than serving. I once watched two insurance agents approach the same potential client. The first one launched immediately into his presentation: features, benefits, cost comparisons. He was polished, professional, and completely focused on closing the deal. The client listened politely but remained distant. The second agent took a different approach. He asked about the client's family, his concerns, his dreams for the future. He listened to stories about the client's children, his aging parents, his hopes for retirement. Only after understanding the person did he begin to discuss how insurance might serve those hopes and protect those dreams. Same product, same price. But one agent saw a sale target, while the other saw a human being with real concerns and genuine needs. Guess who got the business? This is the 11th law of magnetic communication. When people feel seen as individuals rather than opportunities, they open their hearts, their minds, and yes, even their wallets. Think about your own experiences. How do you feel when someone clearly has an agenda with you, when you can sense they're trying to get you to do something, buy something, agree to something? Even if what they're offering might benefit you, doesn't their obvious self-interest make you want to resist? Now, think about how you feel when someone seems genuinely interested in you as a person, when they ask about your life, your challenges, your goals, not to gather ammunition for a sales pitch, but because they genuinely care. How does that change your willingness to listen to what they have to say? The most magnetic communicators approach every interaction with what I call generous curiosity. They're genuinely interested in understanding the other person's world. They ask questions not to qualify prospects, but to understand humans. They listen not to find openings for their pitch, but to discover ways they might truly be helpful. Remember a consultant who transformed her business simply by changing her initial approach with potential clients. Instead of leading with her capabilities and qualifications, she started every conversation by trying to understand their world. Tell me about your biggest challenges right now. What keeps you up at night? What would success look like for you? Not because she was gathering information to craft a proposal, but because she was genuinely curious about their experience. Sometimes, after really understanding their situation, she would even recommend a competitor who might be a better fit. This shocked potential clients, but it also earned their trust in a way that no sales technique ever could. But let me ask you this. When you interact with people, what are you really after? Are you trying to get something from them or give something to them? Are you focused on your agenda or their needs? Are you seeing them as a means to your end or as an end in themselves? Here's what I've discovered about the difference between being seen and being sold to. When people feel seen, they feel valued for who they are, not just for what they can provide. They feel like their thoughts, feelings, and experiences matter to you. They feel human rather than transactional. When people feel sold to, they feel reduced to their potential value to you. They sense that your interest in them is conditional on their willingness to say yes to whatever you're offering. They feel like objects rather than people. The most successful people I know, in business, in relationships, in life, are those who have mastered the art of making others feel genuinely seen and valued. They remember personal details. They follow up on things that matter to people. They celebrate others' successes and offer support during challenges. They understand that every person carries hopes, fears, dreams, and struggles, and they approach each interaction with respect for that complexity and humanity. This doesn't mean you can't have goals for your conversations. It doesn't mean you can't hope to influence or persuade. It just means you do it from a place of genuine care rather than self-serving manipulation. When your primary intention is to understand and serve rather than to get and convince, everything changes. Your questions become more thoughtful, your listening becomes deeper, your responses become more relevant and helpful. I once knew a real estate agent who built $1 million business without ever feeling pushy or salesy. Her secret? She genuinely cared about helping people find the right home for their family, even if it meant a smaller commission or longer timeline for her. She would spend hours understanding not just their budget and preferences, but their lifestyle, their dreams, their concerns. She would sometimes talk people out of houses that weren't right for them, even when they were ready to buy. Her clients became her greatest advocates because they knew she truly cared about their best interests. Here's what most people don't understand about making people feel seen rather than sold to. It's not a technique, it's a mindset. It's approaching every interaction with genuine curiosity and care. It's being more interested in how you can serve than in what you can get. So, here's your challenge. In your next important conversation, focus entirely on understanding the other person. Ask questions because you're genuinely curious about their answers, not because you're building a case for your point of view. Listen to understand their world, not to find openings for your agenda. Show them that they matter to you as a person, not just as a potential yes to whatever you're hoping for. Make them feel seen, heard, and valued for who they are. Because when people feel truly seen by you, they'll not only be more open to what you have to offer, they'll become advocates for who you are. In a world of constant distraction, presence has become a superpower. The most magnetic communicators understand that being fully here, right now, with the person in front of them is the foundation of all influence. You can't connect with someone when your mind is somewhere else. Here's something that might surprise you about trust. People don't just decide to trust you based on your credentials, your track record, or even your words. They decide to trust you based on whether they feel you're truly present with them in the moment. Think about it. When someone is clearly distracted, during a conversation, checking their phone, thinking about their next meeting, mentally somewhere else, how does that make you feel? Even if they're saying all the right things, doesn't their absence diminish your confidence in them? Now think about how you feel when someone gives you their complete, undivided attention. When their phone is put away, when they're looking in, your eyes, when they're clearly nowhere else but right there with you. That presence creates instant trust, doesn't it? I once watched a doctor transform her practice simply by changing one habit. She used to check her computer while patients talked, taking notes and reviewing charts during conversations. Efficient, perhaps, but her patients felt rushed and unheard. Then she started giving each patient 5 minutes of complete, undivided attention before touching her computer. She would sit down, make eye contact, and simply listen. The transformation was immediate. Patient satisfaction scores soared, complaints disappeared, referrals increased. Same doctor, same expertise, same treatment. But now patients felt like she truly cared about them as individuals rather than just medical cases to be processed. This is the 12th law of magnetic communication. Presence isn't just politeness, it's power. When you're fully present with someone, you create a moment of connection that becomes the foundation for everything else. But here's what most people don't realize about presence. It's not just about putting away your devices or maintaining eye contact. True presence is about bringing your whole self, your attention, your energy, your care, into the current moment with the current person. It means temporarily setting aside your own agenda, your own concerns, your own mental to-do list, and focusing entirely on understanding and connecting with the person in front of you. I remember a CEO who was known for making everyone feel like the most important person in the room, whether they were a janitor or a board member. His secret wasn't charm or charisma, it was presence. When he talked to you, not to you while thinking about his next meeting, not to you while solving other problems in his head, just to you. People left conversations with him feeling energized and valued, not because he was particularly witty or wise, but because for those few minutes he was completely there with them. But let me ask you this, when you're in conversation with someone, where is your mind? Are you fully engaged with what they're saying, or are you partially planning your response? Are you listening to understand them, or listening for a break so you can speak? Here's what I've discovered about the challenge of staying present. We live in a culture that rewards multitasking and constant productivity. We've trained our brains to always be moving to the next thing, solving the next problem, thinking about the next step. But presence requires the opposite. It requires slowing down. It requires single tasking. It requires being willing to temporarily set aside everything else and focus on just one thing, the person right in front of you. The most magnetic communicators have learned to create what I call presence breaks in their day, moments where they step out of the rushing current of tasks and demands and simply be present with another human being. They understand that these moments of connection often accomplish more than hours of distracted interaction. A 5-minute conversation where you're fully present can build more trust and rapport than a 30-minute meeting where you're mentally elsewhere. I once knew a sales manager who had an interesting practice. Before every important phone call or meeting, he would take 30 seconds to clear his mind, take a deep breath, and set an intention to be fully present with whoever he was about to speak with. That simple practice transformed his results. Clients felt heard and understood. Team members felt valued and supported. Prospects became customers, not because of his sales techniques, but because of his genuine presence and attention. Here's what most people don't understand about presence. It's not just a gift you give to others, it's a gift you give to yourself. When you're fully present, you're more aware of subtle cues and nuances in communication. You pick up on emotions and concerns that you would miss if you were distracted. You respond more appropriately and effectively. Presence makes you a better listener, a more empathetic responder, and a more influential communicator. It helps you understand not just what people are saying, but what they mean, what they need, and how you can truly help them. But presence is a practice, not a personality trait. Some people are naturally more present than others, but everyone can learn to be more fully here in their interactions. It starts with intention. Before each conversation, remind yourself to be present. Put away devices that might distract you. Clear your mind of other concerns, at least temporarily. Focus on the person you're with and the conversation you're having. It continues with attention. Notice when your mind starts to wander and gently bring it back to the present moment. Pay attention not just to words, but to emotions, energy, and the full human being in front of you. So here's your challenge. Choose one conversation today where you commit to being completely present. No distractions, no mental multitasking, no thinking about what's next. Just be fully there with that person. Notice how it feels different. Notice how they respond differently. Notice how much more you understand and how much deeper the connection becomes. Because in a distracted world, presence is magnetic. It draws people in. It builds trust. It creates the kind of connection that makes everything else possible. Most magnetic people in any room aren't necessarily the loudest or the most talkative. They're the ones who make everyone else feel smart, valued, and heard. They understand that true influence comes not from commanding attention, but from sharing it generously. Here's a truth that will change how you show up in every meeting, every conversation, every social gathering. The person who tries to be the star of every conversation becomes forgettable, but the person who helps others shine becomes unforgettable. I once attended a dinner party where there were two very successful business people. The first dominated every conversation, steering every topic back to his achievements, his insights, his experiences. He was impressive, certainly, but by the end of the evening, everyone was exhausted. The second successful person took a completely different approach. She asked thoughtful questions. She drew out other people's stories. She made connections between people's experiences. She celebrated others' insights and built on their ideas. By the end of the evening, everyone felt energized and valued, and they all remembered her as the most engaging person there. Same level of success, same intelligence, but completely different approaches to influence. This is the 13th law of magnetic communication. You don't need to steal the spotlight to be respected. The most powerful presence in any room is often the one that elevates everyone else. Think about the leaders you most admire, the teachers who changed your life, the managers who brought out your best, the friends who make you feel most confident. Were they the ones who dominated conversations, or were they the ones who invited you into conversations? Did they make you feel small in comparison to their greatness, or did they make you feel great in their presence? The most magnetic communicators understand something profound about human nature. Everyone wants to feel important, intelligent, and valued. When you help people feel these things, they associate those positive feelings with you. But when you dominate conversations to prove your own importance, intelligence, or value, you inadvertently make others feel diminished, and people remember how you make them feel long after they forget what you said. I remember a team leader who transformed her department's culture with a simple change. Instead of running meetings where she shared all the updates and made all the decisions, she started running meetings where everyone shared insights and contributed to solutions. She would ask, "What's your take on the situation? How do you think we should approach this challenge? What are you seeing that I might be missing?" Instead of being the source of all answers, she became the facilitator of collective wisdom. The result? Team engagement soared. Innovation increased. People felt ownership of decisions and outcomes. And she became known as the most effective leader in the company, not because she had all the answers, but because she knew how to draw out the best answers from her team. But let me ask you this. When you're in a group setting, are you trying to impress people with what you know, or are you trying to discover what they know? Are you working to prove your intelligence or to appreciate theirs? Are you competing for attention or creating space for others to contribute? Here's what I've learned about the difference between dominating a room and inviting it in. Domination is about taking attention, taking credit, taking center stage. Invitation is about giving others a voice, giving them recognition, giving them space to shine. The most magnetic communicators are like skilled orchestra conductors. They don't play every instrument. They help every instrument play its best. They don't make all the music. They help create harmony among all the musicians. They ask questions that showcase others' expertise. They remember and reference things people have said. They make connections between different people's ideas. They celebrate others' contributions and build on them. When someone shares an insight, they don't immediately top it with their own insight. They explore it, appreciate it, and help the whole group benefit from it. When someone tells a story, they don't immediately tell a better story. They ask questions that help everyone understand why that story matters. I once watched a consultant win a major contract not by impressing the client with his expertise, but by drawing out the client's expertise. He asked thoughtful questions about their industry, their challenges, their previous solutions. He listened carefully and built on their insights. By the end of the meeting, the client felt like the smartest person in the room, and they wanted to work with the consultant who had made them feel that way. Here's what most people don't understand about inviting the room in rather than dominating it. It's not about being passive or taking a back seat. It's about being an active facilitator of other people's greatness. It requires confidence, the security to know that you don't need to prove your worth by diminishing others. It requires skill, the ability to ask good questions and facilitate meaningful conversations. And it requires generosity, the willingness to share credit and recognition. But the payoff is enormous. When you help others feel valued and heard, they become your advocates. When you facilitate great conversations, people remember you as a great conversationalist. When you make others feel smart, they think you're brilliant. So here's your challenge. In your next group interaction, whether it's a meeting, a social gathering, or even a family dinner, focus on being a facilitator rather than a dominator. Ask questions that draw out others' thoughts. Build on their ideas. Celebrate their insights. Watch how the energy in the room changes when people feel invited rather than overshadowed. Watch how much more engaged everyone becomes. Watch how much more they appreciate and remember you. Because the most magnetic presence in any room isn't the one that commands all the attention. It's the one that helps everyone else feel worthy of attention. People don't need you to be right about everything. They need you to understand how they feel about anything. The most magnetic communicators know that emotions matter more than facts in building connection. When you validate someone's feelings, you validate their humanity. Here's something that will transform every difficult conversation you ever have. People can argue with your facts, but they can't argue with their feelings. When you acknowledge and validate how someone feels, you create a bridge to their heart that logic alone can never build. I once watched a customer service representative turn an angry customer into a loyal advocate with a single sentence. The customer was furious about a delayed shipment that had ruined his plans. He was shouting about incompetence and threatening to never do business with the company again. The representative could have responded with facts, shipping delays, weather conditions, company policy. Instead, she said, "I can hear how frustrated and disappointed you are, and I completely understand why you feel that way. If I were in your situation, I'd be upset too." The customer's anger immediately deflated, not because the problem was solved, it wasn't yet, but because someone had acknowledged his feelings as valid and understandable. Once he felt heard and understood, he became collaborative in finding a solution. This is the 14th law of magnetic communication. Validation opens hearts. Acknowledgement builds bridges. When you honor someone's emotional experience, you honor their humanity. Think about the last time you were upset about something and someone responded by immediately trying to fix the problem or explain why you shouldn't feel that way. How did that make you feel? Even if their solutions were good and their logic was sound, didn't their dismissal of your emotions make you feel unheard? Now, think about a time when someone simply acknowledged how you were feeling. That must have been really frustrating. I can see why you're worried about that. That sounds incredibly disappointing. Even if they didn't fix anything, didn't their validation make you feel understood and less alone? The most magnetic communicators understand that feelings aren't right or wrong. They just are. They don't judge emotions or try to talk people out of them. They recognize that emotions are information about someone's inner experience and that information deserves respect. When someone says they're overwhelmed, magnetic communicators don't immediately offer time management tips. They first acknowledge, "It sounds like you're carrying a really heavy load right now." When someone expresses fear about a change, they don't immediately list all the benefits of the change. They first validate. Change can feel scary, especially when there are so many unknowns. When someone shares their excitement about something, they don't immediately point out potential problems. They first celebrate, "You seem really energized about this opportunity." I remember a manager who struggled with a team member who was resistant to a new process. Every time they met, the manager would explain the benefits and logic of the change, and the employee would become more defensive and resistant. Finally, the manager tried a different approach. He said, "It seems like this change feels overwhelming. To you, is that accurate?" The employee's defenses crumbled. He shared his fears about learning new systems, his worry about making mistakes, his feeling that his expertise was being devalued. Once those feelings were acknowledged and validated, they could address them directly. The resistance wasn't about the logic of the change, it was about the emotions surrounding it. But let me ask you this. When someone shares their feelings with you, is your first instinct to fix, advise, or explain? Or is it to acknowledge, understand, and validate? Do you honor their emotional experience, or do you try to change it immediately? Here's what I've discovered about the power of validation. It doesn't mean you agree with someone's conclusions, or that you think their feelings are justified by the facts. It simply means you recognize that their feelings are real and understandable from their perspective. You can validate someone's frustration while still maintaining your position. You can acknowledge someone's disappointment while still enforcing necessary boundaries. You can understand someone's fear while still moving forward with important changes. Validation isn't agreement, it's recognition. It's seeing the person behind the position, the human behind the opinion, the heart behind the words. The most successful leaders I know have mastered this art. They can say things like, "I understand. This decision is disappointing, and I respect that you feel strongly about it. Let me explain the reasoning behind it." Or, "I can see why this change would feel threatening. Your concerns make sense to me." They don't dismiss emotions to get to facts. They honor emotions as part of the facts. They understand that how someone feels about a situation is as important as the situation itself. I once watched a negotiation completely transform when one party stopped arguing about the terms and started acknowledging the other party's concerns. "I can see this puts you in a difficult position. I understand why this timing feels problematic for you. I appreciate how important this is to your team." Those validating statements didn't change the facts, but they changed the dynamic. Suddenly, both parties were working together to find solutions that honored everyone's concerns rather than fighting to prove who was right. Here's what most people don't understand about validation. It doesn't make you weak or wishy-washy. It makes you wise and magnetic. It doesn't mean you can't have strong opinions or make tough decisions. It means you can do those things while still honoring other people's humanity. So, here's your challenge. The next time someone shares their feelings, whether positive or negative, resist the urge to immediately fix, advise, or redirect. Instead, simply acknowledge what you're hearing. "That sounds really challenging. I can see why you'd be excited about that. That must have been disappointing. I understand why you'd feel that way." Watch how validation changes the conversation. Watch how it opens doors that logic couldn't budge. Watch how it builds trust and connection in ways that facts alone never could, because people don't just want to be heard, they want to be felt. And when you validate their emotions, you show them that their inner world matters to you. Conflict is inevitable, but combat is optional. The most magnetic communicators have learned the secret of transforming disagreement into partnership, tension into teamwork, opposition into opportunity. They understand that the goal isn't to win arguments, it's to win relationships. Here's a truth that will change how you handle every difficult conversation. Most conflict isn't really about the surface issue people are arguing about. It's about deeper needs, the need to feel heard, respected, valued, and understood. Address those needs, and you can transform any conflict. I once witnessed a heated board meeting where two executives were locked in bitter disagreement about budget allocation. Each was passionate about their department's needs. Each had compelling arguments. Each was determined to win. The meeting was going nowhere until the CEO did something unexpected. Instead of taking sides or forcing a decision, he said, "I can see that you both care deeply about the success of this company. You both want to ensure we're investing our resources wisely. Let's start there with what we agree on and work toward a solution that honors both of your concerns. The energy in the room immediately shifted. Instead of adversaries fighting over limited resources, they became partners solving a shared problem. By the end of the meeting, they had developed a creative solution that neither had considered initially. This is the 15th law of magnetic communication. When you change the frame from me versus you to us versus the problem, everything changes. Enemies become allies. Competition becomes collaboration. Think about your own experiences with conflict. When someone disagrees with you, what's your natural instinct? Is it to prove them wrong, to defend your position, to win the argument? And how often does that approach lead to genuine resolution versus grudging compliance or ongoing resentment? Now, think about times when conflict was resolved in a way that actually strengthened relationships. What was different about those situations? Chances are someone shifted from trying to defeat the other person to trying to understand them and find common ground. The most magnetic communicators approach conflict with curiosity rather than combat. When someone disagrees with them, their first question isn't, "How can I prove they're wrong?" but, "What can I learn from their perspective?" They're genuinely interested in understanding why reasonable people might see things differently. I remember a sales manager who was constantly in conflict with the marketing department. Sales blamed marketing for poor lead quality. Marketing blamed sales for not following up properly. Each meeting became a blame session that solved nothing. Then the sales manager tried a different approach. Instead of listing everything marketing was doing wrong, he said, "Help me understand the challenges you're facing in generating qualified leads. What obstacles are preventing you from giving us what we need?" That simple shift from accusation to inquiry changed everything. Marketing shared their constraints, budget limitations, unclear target criteria, insufficient feedback from sales. Sales shared their challenges, timing mismatches, qualification criteria, follow-up systems. Together, they developed solutions that addressed everyone's concerns. The conflict became collaboration. But let me ask you this. When you encounter disagreement, do you listen to understand or listen to rebut? Do you look for what might be valid in the other person's perspective, or do you focus on what's wrong with it? Do you seek common ground, or do you fortify your position? Here's what I've learned about transforming conflict into collaboration. It starts with changing your goal. Instead of trying to win, try to understand. Instead of proving your point, explore their point. Instead of defeating their argument, discover their concerns. This doesn't mean abandoning your position or agreeing with everything they say. It means being curious about why they hold their position and what needs it serves for them. The most skillful conflict resolvers use phrases like, "Help me understand," "What concerns you most about," "What would need to happen for you to feel comfortable with." These aren't weak phrases. They're powerful tools for transformation. They also look for shared values and common ground. Even in heated disagreements, there are usually underlying values that everyone shares. Wanting the best outcome, caring about fairness, desiring success, protecting important relationships. When you can identify and verbalize these shared values, you create a foundation for collaboration. We both want what's best for our customers. We both care about the company's success. We both value fairness and respect. I once watched a divorce mediation that could have become a bitter court battle transform into a collaborative co-parenting plan. The mediator kept bringing the discussion back to the one thing both parents agreed on: their love for their children and their desire to minimize the trauma of divorce. Every decision was filtered through that shared value. Instead of fighting about who was right, they focused on what was right for their kids. The result was a solution that served everyone better than a court-imposed judgment would have. Here's what most people don't understand about conflict transformation. It requires strength, not weakness. It takes confidence to be curious about opposing viewpoints. It takes security to look for validity in criticism. It takes courage to admit when you might be wrong or incomplete in your understanding. But the rewards are enormous. When you transform conflict into collaboration, you don't just solve the immediate problem. You strengthen the relationship. You build trust and respect that serves you in future challenges. You model a way of handling disagreement that others will remember and emulate. So here's your challenge. The next time you face conflict, whether it's a disagreement with a colleague, a dispute with a family member, or tension with a friend, resist the urge to defend and attack. Instead, get curious. Ask questions. Seek to understand their perspective. Look for shared values and common ground. Focus on solving the problem together rather than proving who's right. Watch how this changes the dynamic. Watch how defensive people become collaborative when they feel heard and understood. Watch how conflicts that seemed impossible to resolve suddenly have creative solutions, because the most magnetic communicators don't avoid conflict, they transform it. They turn opposition into opportunity, disagreement into understanding, and conflict into deeper connection. Words lie, bodies don't. The most magnetic communicators understand that the real conversation is happening beneath the surface of speech. They read the room, notice the signals, and respond to what people are really saying, even when they're not saying it out loud. Here's something that will make you a mind reader in every interaction. People communicate with their entire being, not just their words. Their posture tells you about their confidence. Their eyes reveal their interest. Their breathing shows their emotional state. Their gestures expose their true feelings. And here's the powerful part. This body language happens first, before the words, before the conscious thought. It's the unfiltered truth of what someone is really experiencing. I once watched a negotiation where everything seemed to be going smoothly. The other party was saying all the right things. They were interested, they saw the value, they wanted to move forward. But something felt off to the experienced negotiator. The prospect's arms were crossed. His chair was angled slightly away. His foot was tapping anxiously. His smile never quite reached his eyes. While his words said yes, his body was screaming no. Instead of pushing forward with the close, the negotiator paused and said, "I'm sensing some hesitation. What concerns do you have that we haven't addressed yet?" The prospect's relief was visible as he shared his real concerns that his words hadn't revealed. This is the 16th law of magnetic communication. The body never lies, but it speaks. A language most people never learned to read. Master this language, and you'll understand what people really mean, not just what they say. Think about your own experiences. Haven't you ever felt that something was off in a conversation, even when the words sounded fine? Haven't you sensed when someone was uncomfortable, excited, bored, or nervous, even before they told you? That's your unconscious mind reading. Their body language. The most magnetic communicators have learned to trust these instincts and act on them. They notice when someone's energy shifts during a presentation and adjust accordingly. They pick up on subtle signs of confusion and clarify their message. They sense resistance and address it before it becomes opposition. But they don't just read body language. They use it intentionally. They understand that their own posture, gestures, and facial expressions are constantly communicating messages about their confidence, openness, and sincerity. I remember a job candidate who had perfect credentials and gave great answers to every question. But something about his body language made the interviewers uncomfortable. He avoided eye contact. His handshake was weak. He fidgeted constantly. Despite his qualifications, he didn't get the job because his nonverbal communication undermined his verbal competence. Another candidate with fewer qualifications but confident body language, steady eye contact, and genuine enthusiasm got the position. His body language said, "Trust me," louder than his resume ever could. But let me ask you this. When you're communicating with someone, are you only listening to their words, or are you also watching their body? Are you aware of what your own posture and gestures are communicating? Do you notice when there's a disconnect between someone's words and their nonverbal signals. Here's what I've learned about reading the unspoken conversation. Eyes are the windows to engagement. When someone is truly interested, their eyes focus on you. When they're bored or distracted, their eyes wander. When they're uncomfortable, they avoid eye contact. When they're lying or uncertain, their eyes often look away. Posture reveals attitude. Open posture, uncrossed arms, forward lean, relaxed shoulders, signals interest and agreement. Closed posture, crossed arms, leaning back, turned away, suggests resistance or discomfort. Confident posture, straight spine, shoulders back, head up, communicates authority and credibility. Voice carries emotion that words can't hide. Tension changes vocal quality. Excitement speeds up speech. Fear makes voices tight and higher. Confidence creates steady, measured tones. The most magnetic communicators listen not just to what people say, but how they say it. Facial expressions leak true feelings. Micro-expressions flash across faces before people can control them, revealing genuine emotions. A forced smile looks different from a genuine one. Real concern shows in furrowed brows. Authentic enthusiasm lights up the entire face. But here's the advanced skill, recognizing clusters of signals rather than isolated gestures. One crossed arm might just mean someone is cold, but crossed arms combined with a slight lean away, tightened lips, and reduced eye contact probably means resistance or disagreement. I once watched a master salesperson notice that her client's breathing had become shallow and his shoulders had tensed, even though he was still asking questions and seemed engaged. She said, "I'm wondering if I'm overwhelming you with too much information. Should we slow down and focus on what matters most to you?" He was grateful for the pause and admitted he was feeling pressured. By responding to his body language rather than just his words, she saved the relationship and eventually closed the sale. Here's what most people don't understand about nonverbal communication. It's not about becoming a human lie detector or manipulating others. It's about becoming more sensitive to the full human experience, both your own and others. When you notice that someone's body language doesn't match their words, it's usually not because they're trying to deceive you. It's because they're not fully aware of their own feelings, or they're trying to be polite when they have concerns, or they want to agree but something doesn't feel right. The most magnetic communicators use these observations with empathy and care. They create space for people to express what their bodies are already communicating. They adjust their approach based on what they're sensing, not just what they're hearing. So here's your challenge. In your next important conversation, pay attention to the unspoken conversation. Notice posture, eye contact, facial expressions, voice tone, and energy level. Trust your instincts when something feels off, even if the words sound right. And be aware of your own nonverbal communication. Stand or sit with confident, open posture. Maintain appropriate eye contact. Let your facial expressions match your genuine feelings. Ensure your body language supports your message, because people will forget your words, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And how you make them feel is communicated more through your body than your voice. Every interaction is an opportunity to either add to someone's life or subtract from it. The most magnetic communicators understand this profound responsibility. They see every conversation as a chance to leave someone feeling more encouraged, more valued, more hopeful than they were before. Here's a truth that will change how you approach every human encounter. People will forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And how you make them feel becomes part of who they are long after you're gone. I once knew a cashier at a grocery store who transformed an ordinary job into something extraordinary. She didn't just process transactions, she brightened days. She remembered regular customers' names. She asked about their families. She celebrated their small victories and offered encouragement during their struggles. People would drive out of their way to shop at her store, not because the prices were better or the selection was superior, but because they knew they would leave feeling better about themselves and their day. She understood that her real job wasn't scanning barcodes, it was touching lives. One customer told me that during a particularly difficult period in her life, this cashier's genuine smile and kind words were sometimes the only bright spot in her day. "She made me feel like I mattered," the customer said. "She made me feel seen." This is the 17th law of magnetic communication. Your impact on others outlasts your interaction with them. Every conversation either lifts people up or brings them down. Every encounter either adds light to their world or dims it slightly. Think about the people who have left positive imprints on your life. The teacher who believed in you when you doubted yourself. The friend who encouraged you through a difficult time. The stranger who showed unexpected kindness when you needed it most. How did those interactions change you? How do you still carry those positive feelings with you? Now think about interactions that left you feeling diminished. The person who criticized unnecessarily. The colleague who dismissed your ideas. The service provider who made you feel like an inconvenience. How long did those negative feelings linger? How did they affect your confidence or mood? The most magnetic communicators are acutely aware of this power they hold. They understand that their words, their tone, their attention, their energy, all have the power to impact another person's day, week, or even life. They choose to use this power constructively. They look for opportunities to encourage, appreciate, and inspire. They catch people doing things right, rather than pointing out what's wrong. They focus on possibilities, rather than problems. They speak to people's potential, rather than their limitations. I remember a manager who had a unique practice. At the end of every interaction with a team member, he would ask himself, "Did I leave this person feeling better or worse than when our conversation started?" If the answer was worse, he would find a way to circle back and repair the damage. His team had the highest morale and productivity in the company, not because he was easy on them or lowered standards, but because people felt valued and supported, even during difficult conversations about performance or challenges. But let me ask you this. When people walk away from conversations with you, how do they feel? Do they feel energized or drained? Valued or dismissed? Hopeful or discouraged? Important or insignificant? Here's what I've discovered about leaving people feeling better. It doesn't require grand gestures or profound wisdom. It often happens through small acts of genuine care and attention, remembering someone's name and using it, asking about something they mentioned previously, acknowledging their efforts, even if the results weren't perfect, listening without judgment when they share concerns, celebrating their successes, no matter how small. The most magnetic people become masters of what I call emotional deposits. Every interaction is an opportunity to make a deposit in the emotional bank account of their relationship with that person. A genuine compliment is a deposit. Active listening is a deposit. Showing up when you say you will is a deposit. Defending someone in their absence is a deposit. Admitting when you're wrong is a deposit. Over time, these deposits compound. People trust you more, open up to you more, and want to be around you more because their experiences with you consistently add value to their lives. I once knew a leader who was beloved by everyone who worked with him, even though he sometimes had to deliver difficult news or make unpopular decisions. His secret was that he had made so many positive emotional deposits that people trusted his intentions even when they disagreed with his decisions. He never missed an opportunity to acknowledge good work. He remembered personal details about people's lives. He showed genuine concern during difficult times. He celebrated team victories enthusiastically. He took responsibility for failures and shared credit for successes. When he had to let someone go due to budget constraints, they thanked him for how he handled it and asked if they could use him as a reference. That's the power of consistently leaving people feeling better than you found them. Here's what most people don't understand about this principle. It's not about being fake positive or avoiding difficult conversations. It's about approaching every interaction with the intention to honor the person's dignity and worth. Even when you have to address problems or deliver unwelcome news, you can give constructive feedback in a way that leaves someone feeling challenged but supported, rather than criticized and deflated. You can enforce boundaries in a way that leaves people feeling respected rather than rejected. You can disagree with someone's ideas while still validating their right to have those ideas. So here's your challenge. For the next week, set an intention before every interaction to leave that person feeling better than you found them. Look for opportunities to encourage, appreciate, and uplift. Notice how this changes not just their experience, but yours as well. Notice how much more positive your days become when you're focused on adding light to other people's lives. Because when you consistently leave people feeling better than you found them, you become someone they're always happy to see. You become a source of positive energy in their world. You become magnetic not because you're trying to attract people to you, but because you're genuinely adding value to their lives. And that's the kind of magnetism that creates lasting relationships, opens unexpected opportunities, and makes the world a little brighter for everyone you encounter. The most powerful influence doesn't push, it pulls. It doesn't demand, it invites. It doesn't force, it inspires. The most magnetic communicators understand that true influence comes not from overpowering others, but from empowering them to choose freely. Here's the final truth that ties together everything we've discussed. People don't resist good ideas. They resist being controlled. When you try to force someone to agree with you, change their mind, or do what you want, their natural response is to push back. But when you create space for them to reach their own conclusions, they become advocates for the very thing you wanted them to embrace. I once watched a master negotiator close a deal that seemed impossible. The client had rejected 3 previous proposals, each more generous than the last. Their objections seemed insurmountable. Their position appeared fixed. Then, this negotiator did something unexpected. Instead of presenting another proposal, he said, "You know your business better than anyone. Given everything we've discussed, what would a solution need to look like for it to work for you?" Then he listened, really listened. The client began describing exactly what he needed. As he talked, he began to solve his own objections. He started to see possibilities he hadn't considered before. By the end of the conversation, he was practically selling himself on why this partnership made sense. The negotiator had led him to water by respecting his autonomy and intelligence, and the client drank deeply because it was his choice. This is the 18th and final law of magnetic communication. The most persuasive message is one that helps people persuade themselves. The most influential approach is one that honors people's freedom to choose. Think about your own experiences with being influenced. When has someone most successfully changed your mind or motivated you to action? Was it when they pressured you, argued with you, or manipulated you? Or was it when they helped you see something clearly, respected your intelligence, and trusted you to make good decisions? The most magnetic communicators understand that people have an innate need for autonomy. We want to feel like we're making our own choices, reaching our own conclusions, maintaining our own agency. When that autonomy is threatened, we resist, even when the idea being pushed is actually good for us. But when our autonomy is respected and honored, we become open to influence. We listen more carefully, we consider more thoughtfully, we commit more deeply to decisions we feel we've made freely. This doesn't mean being passive or avoiding advocacy for your ideas. It means presenting your case in a way that invites consideration rather than demanding acceptance. It means creating space for dialogue rather than delivering monologues. It means trusting people's judgment rather than trying to override it. I remember a parent who struggled with her teenage daughter's poor academic performance. Every conversation became an argument about grades, study habits, and college preparation. The more the mother pushed, the more the daughter resisted. Finally, the mother tried a different approach. Instead of lecturing about the importance of education, she asked questions. What are your dreams for your future? What kind of life do you want to create for yourself? What might help you get there? As the daughter talked about her aspirations, she began to see the connection between her current choices and her future possibilities. The mother didn't have to convince her daughter that education mattered. The daughter convinced herself. But let me ask you this. When you want to influence someone, do you lead with your agenda or their interests? Do you tell them what to think or help them think more clearly? Do you try to win arguments or do you try to win hearts and minds? Here's what I've learned about influence without force. It requires genuine respect for the other person's intelligence and judgment. It means believing that when people have good information and the freedom to choose, they'll usually make good decisions. It also requires patience. Force can create immediate compliance, but influence builds lasting commitment. When you rush to convince someone, you often create resistance. When you give them time and space to process, you create buy-in. The most magnetic influencers use phrases like, "What do you think about?" instead of, "You should." They say, "Have you considered?" instead of, "You need to." They ask, "How does this sound to you?" instead of demanding, "This is what we're going to do." These aren't just different words, they're different philosophies. One approach treats people as obstacles to overcome. The other treats them as partners to engage. I once watched a CEO transform a company culture simply by changing how decisions were communicated. Instead of announcing changes and expecting compliance, she started presenting challenges and inviting solutions. We need to improve customer satisfaction. What ideas do you have? Our costs are too high. How might we address this together? We're losing market share. What do you think we should do differently? The same problems, the same ultimate goals. But now people felt like partners in the solution rather than victims of change imposed from above. Engagement soared. Innovation flourished. Implementation became seamless because people were implementing their own ideas. Here's what most people don't understand about leading with warmth and ending with respect. Warmth creates the emotional safety that makes people open to influence. Respect ensures they maintain their dignity and autonomy throughout the process. When you combine genuine care for someone's well-being with deep respect for their intelligence and freedom, you create the conditions where true influence can flourish. People trust your intentions because of your warmth. They trust your methods because of your respect. This is the essence of magnetic communication. Not manipulation disguised as charm, but genuine care expressed through respectful influence. Not overwhelming people with your agenda, but helping them discover their own path to better outcomes. The most magnetic communicators I've known all share this quality. They influence others by making them feel more capable, more valued, more empowered than they felt before. They don't diminish others to elevate themselves. They lift others up and invite them to choose the higher path. So here's your final challenge. In every future interaction where you want to influence someone, start with their interests and end with their choice. Present your ideas in ways that honor their intelligence, create space for their input, and respect their autonomy. Lead with warmth that shows you care about them as a person. End with respect that honors their right to choose their own path. Watch how this transforms not just your ability to influence others, but their willingness to be influenced by you. Watch how relationships deepen when people feel respected rather than manipulated. Watch how much more committed people become to decisions they feel they've made freely. Because the most powerful influence isn't force, it's attraction. It's becoming the kind of person others want to listen to, learn from, and follow. It's earning the right to be heard through the consistency of your character and the quality of your care. These 18 laws of magnetic communication aren't just techniques to master, they're principles to live by. They're not just about becoming more persuasive, they're about becoming more human. Master them, and you won't just communicate more effectively. You'll connect more deeply, influence more ethically, and leave every person you encounter a little better than you found them. And that's true magnetism. Not the kind that pulls people toward you for your benefit, but the kind that lifts people up for theirs. You already have what it takes. Now, go prove it.